Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Alloutcoach podcast. My name is Tim Mikhelishvili. I'm CEO and co-founder of Pharma, a performance analytics and management consulting agency in life sciences. At Alloutcoach, we research competition and we're inspired by innovation. A few months ago, we started a first ever Innovation Olympics event in the pharma and biotech industry. And today we're going to hear from our first winners who are physicians with pharmaceutical experience and who also have an exciting startup called Discreedly. Vinay Tharayil and Gibu George. Welcome to the Alloutcoach podcast, my friends. How are you?
Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Tim, for inviting us. Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Your background, you're both physicians. You're experienced on the provider side, on pharma, on biotech.
Yep.
And you started Discreedly last year. And, you have an amazing story. A lot of the all-star expert judges found your solution very exciting. You were awarded for the Field Medical Affairs category gold medal winners as well. And we'll talk about what Field Medical Affairs is as well. And also, you have both the clinical informatics side, Dr. Gibu George. And so I would really love to introduce you to the Alloutcoach listeners and friends. Maybe take us through your background, your journey as, so the people get to know who Vinay Tharayil and who Gibu.
Sure. Yeah.
Of course. Maybe I'll start. So first of all, Tim, thanks so much for having us on the podcast and giving us a chance to talk about us as well as Discreedly. So a little bit about my background. I was born in India, grew up in Canada, matured in California, and educated in Europe. So I have a pretty diverse background across the globe. Gibu and I actually went to med school together, so we've been best friends for almost 20 years. My life, sort of my professional life really took me into the realm of the pharmaceutical industry, predominantly in the medical affairs space. I started out as an MSL, focused in the immunology therapeutic area for BMS, and we did the products for their rheumatology arthritis products that they had. That took me over then to Syneos Health, where we were contracted for GSK under their vaccines portfolio, and so I worked in the vaccine space as well, and then had some experience with a Japanese company for more from a field medical excellence perspective as well. So I have a pretty dynamic and broad background in the pharmaceutical industry and medical affairs space, and so I'm very passionate about medical affairs, specifically with MSL role. I know that there's a lot of value that the MSLs bring to the organization, and that. But at the same time, it's also it goes under the radar. And so that's really what we wanted to do with Discreetly is, one, elevate the medical science liaison teams and the field medical teams, and really even the medical affairs in general through this platform, and create a way for them to be able to engage with healthcare providers in a more dynamic fashion and really elevate the value that medical affairs brings, not only externally to the stakeholders, but also internally into the organization. And that's really what we've been working on with Discreetly and continue to work on at this time.
Vinay, and I learned at the Olympics event, at our Medical Affairs Innovation Olympics, that you also played hockey as well.
Yeah, yes, I did. Yeah. Those were my days in Canada. That's also why I have a dimple on my face. It's not a natural dimple, but it was from taking a stick to the face in one of the games. Scars, battle scars, like to call it that. And I also forgot to mention that I'm a father of two girls and expecting a boy on the way, which we found out at the finals of the Medical Affairs Innovation Olympics too. So a little bit about myself.
Yeah. And so, and my name is Gibu, and I'm my background is a little more in the clinical informatics space. So as Vinay said, we graduated from medical school together, and my direction kind of went a little more towards that healthcare system settings, where typically really my background is in Epic implementation and helping set up systems in like these large healthcare networks. And even beyond that, I've actually worked with the New England Journal of Medicine. I've done some work in precision medicine. So I have a pretty broad background around technology in the healthcare space. And, Vinay was talking about, how we came up with the app, and sort of, one of the things that I was able to realize was that, technology is adaptable in healthcare, but I don't think it has been done very well up until this point. And I think COVID kind of escalated that and made it very quick and adaptable. And the company Discreedly kind of can show what, you know, a healthcare system can do once they adapt an application like Discreedly. And so we're really excited to talk about that today.
Absolutely. So before we get into the Discreedly and maybe take the listeners from all the steps that took you to the prototype that you have developed and you're continuously enhancing, I want to get your philosophy on medical affairs and maybe introduce medical affairs to our listeners. What makes medical affairs critical today in terms of medical information and how our providers or patients access it? For various different healthcare consumers.
So from the medical affairs perspective, I think one of the greatest values that medical affairs brings to the healthcare community is the fact that we are able to provide education and information to healthcare providers, various types of healthcare providers. One of the main things that we can see is, companies are continuously churning out very innovative and advanced therapeutics, in a pretty rather fast manner, and as a result of that, there's a ton of data and a ton of information that's being created around these products, and even some education is required around that. And that's really where the medical affairs divisions of these companies really stand out, is because the main focus and the driver for medical affairs is scientific exchange from the MSL's perspective, and medical education and communicating this content in a robust way, and addressing the needs that physicians and other healthcare providers may have when it comes to these particular products. One thing that I think that I really love to say when people ask me about medical affairs is that medical affairs is really focused on their science. We're not driven by sales numbers. We're not governed by product performance. We're governed by data dissemination. And so that's really what I like to differentiate and highlight for us, is that we're focused on disseminating the data, disseminating the information, and educating. And through that, we're able to empower physicians to utilize, new medications and innovative medications that would be beneficial for the patients. One of the things we can speak from, at least from experience as physicians, and just, with colleagues of ours, and really just a ton of robust research we've been doing. Physicians are creatures of habit. They're very much, if they're comfortable with something, they're just going to stick to that because it's just easier for them. And that's one of the things that medical affairs can do, is help take these providers out of that comfort zone a little bit and make them feel more comfortable with using maybe a new product that they might not have heard about, or maybe just recently discovering, and making them comfortable by helping them understand the science behind it and understand the complex data sets and the rationale for why this medication might be good for your patient, and providing them with not only clinical trials data, but also real world evidence, materials, things like that will be relevant and applicable to them in their daily practice. And so that's really where I feel like medical affairs really brings that value to the healthcare provider and community setting. And I think for us, one of the main things with Discreedly is that, thinking about what medical affairs does, and the resources that we have available and the capabilities that we're able to provide healthcare providers, we wanted to take it and bring it to that community level focus. Typically right now, medical affairs, we tend to focus on what we call the KOL, or the key opinion leaders, or the thought leaders, right? In these academic institutions, and that may be largely due to bandwidth issues, or maybe size of medical affairs teams and things like that. And we feel like all this data and all this valuable information that we have needs to be also shared in that community level, and empower those community level physicians. And that's really what the goal and the aim for Discreedly really is to help increase that reach and increase the value that medical affairs provides to a wider audience.
Yeah. And just to add, healthcare providers love data. They want to see data, right? And the thing is, the simple fact is that they're not all too familiar with medical affairs. There's a small section, and it is, like Vinay said, it's the top tier hospitals, larger networks. And, coming from a large organization previously worked at that acquired smaller community hospitals, they were amazed at the simplest technology that, these large healthcare networks had. And now we're giving them access to data that could be super pivotal to their information and, to their patient care.
Yeah.
And to kind of add on to that, we saw that especially in the pandemic and post-pandemic, the thirst for data and the thirst for information, clinical information around medications significantly rose. I mean, tons of studies have shown that, over 70% of physicians were actively searching, for new medications or actively searching for data on how to manage some of these complex patients that they have, especially, in the setting of COVID and how do they, manage some of the treatment profiles or treatment strategies. And so that's where we feel like it's kind of positioned medical affairs to start elevating themselves, more and in a rapid fashion to meet these needs that providers have right now.
Yeah, and conversations like the ones that we're having, I think, are educating, the public also about medical affairs and their role externally as well as internally, because I think a lot of the public is more familiar with R&D, with commercial marketing.
Yeah.
But we work by integrating those kinds of insights and the needs, the unmet needs, or the burden of various different disease states. With our colleagues internally as well. Gibu, I know you mentioned your experience with Epic, right? So I think healthcare equity and health access to information is, I think, now becoming more and more important, where patients, they want to be involved in their care. They want to know from payers about the very detailed breakdown of the costs. They want to know about whether or not they can afford medications, or they want to be educated about that from the physicians as well. Right? There's a lot of data from Salesforce, recent reports that I've seen. What is the relevance of a pharmaceutical company exploring new ways to communicate with providers in order to improve access to care?
It's extremely important, right? So we know that, healthcare providers kind of struggle with getting information, right? And, to speak a little more to the background of it, we've talked to other providers. We've done extensive research before coming up with this app. And some of the things that we heard were, we put providers in specific situations and we were asking them, how would they find this information? And to hear how many people answered, and obviously we will not say any names, that they would simply Google search something, which is very scary to consider, right? That, to an untrusted source for information, and that kind of put us in perspective, made us think about, what is the information that these providers need and how do we make it as easy as possible for them to get that information? And essentially, that's how we design the entire app, right? Personally speaking, I found out during COVID that I had a heart condition that kind of came out of nowhere. It was during a stress test. The doctor was just like, well, how long have you had this? I was like, I had no idea I had this. And so we go from that into COVID, and we have a vaccine that was produced and not a ton of information yet around that vaccine. So I asked my healthcare provider, should I be worried about taking such a vaccine with my heart condition? My doctor was like, we kind of just have to do it right now. We don't know enough information. He didn't know where to go to. He's a small healthcare provider in a small community hospital. And so, all of this put together is where we realized how there would be this value for this app here. So there's a ton of information. As long as we put it at their fingertips, make it as easily accessible as possible, with Epic integration, trying to get it where the provider's workflow is. Where do they find, or we know when a provider places an order for a medication, we know exactly where in Epic they would place that medication. So to be able to find that, like the pricing for a patient right then and there and try to get something set up with someone, it's all about making ease of use for a healthcare provider, spending their time wisely, right? And that's like the whole idea behind, EHR systems in healthcare systems. So.
Yeah. And to kind of add to that, one of the main focus points for us with Discreedly is like kind of shifting the dynamic a little bit of how engagement happens between pharma and healthcare provider, and putting the provider really in the captain's chair, putting them in the seat to be able to govern the direction, as far as engagement is concerned, the frequency of engagement is concerned, and allowing them access to the information that we have in a centralized platform, right? Medical affairs has, and really pharma companies in general, right, they know everything there is to know about their product, who's covering their product, what tiers they belong on, what studies are happening, who's looking at, this investigating this in product in a smaller trial, things like that. So we have all this data, and all we're trying to do is create a central space for a doctor to go and get this information in one place and access that. And to kind of speak back to that, that concept that you were, or the point you were making about like the relevant information that doctors would want, like for example, you were asking about formulary coverage, things like that. That's already built into the platform. We have a space that we're building in there so that physicians can jump on the platform, learn about a new product, see which insurance provider is covering it, what tiers it'll fall on, all at their fingertips. And apart from that, we're also exploring the idea of incorporating social determinants of health. These are it's a new concept that, it's emerging in the healthcare space. And I think it's also relevant, especially when we start looking at that community level, like what social determinants of health can impact a patient's outcome. And that's something that we're exploring right now, is how we can incorporate that into the platform to give a physician a more holistic view of a patient's potential, treatment journey if they are planning to, prescribe a certain medication for that patient, and what data is available around that.
Okay, since we've already alluded to Discreedly a little bit, let's get into some of the details, and maybe let's just start with why you called it Discreedly. And I know you have a name, slogan, farm to.
I think that's one of our biggest prides is cause for celebration, is that everyone loves our tagline. So if anything, at least we got that right. As far as the name Discreedly, it's actually a play on the word screed. And, screed means, a long speech or a long story or essay. And typically, if you get the way I think about it is like if you're a provider and you get a sample or a new medication, and you unfold that prescribing information, I mean, it's literally like sometimes like a scroll that you're unfolding, you know what I mean? Where it's just a ton of information in there. And even, if you were to go on PubMed and try to find any kind of answers that you would want, it's tons and tons and tons of data and tons of articles. And what we're trying to do is discreet, make it easy for a doctor to consume all this information in a quick way and provide them with the access to succinct resources in the platform, but not only that, provide them with on-demand engagement with experts, the medical experts, the medical science liaisons, or the medical information specialists, to just ask the targeted question and get that specific answer right then and there. They don't have to spend hours and hours trying to go through all this. And so that's what we're trying to do, is discreet, to shorten this consumption of this data. And then the other word is screed is also a tool that's used to level, a concrete floor or to smooth out a path. And that's what we want to do. We want to smoothen out the path for that community level providers to access this information. And so that's really where we came up with the name, Discreetly.
Yeah, and over the past few years, engaging with physicians has not been very easy for pharma. So we spoke a little bit about the value proposition for patients in terms of the access, the formulary coverage. How would the pharmaceutical companies, use your program? Can you maybe take us through the flow of?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, Discreetly is a platform, and there's a back-end channel where the medical affairs divisions will be able to, upload content, upload products that, on their platform, upload all the relevant content around it. So your standard PI information, but then also additional information like, formulary or, media that might be created, medical information letters, if they want to make those available. They can all upload it from a back-end portal that they have. And then, so they're managing the content. They are curating the content on the platform. We are working, we're in discussions right now with a company that could help with some of that content creation for a pharma company. So, if they really want to make this, more streamlined for themselves, we have those, we could potentially offer that as an option for a company. But yeah, they're in charge of the content. They're in charge of really what they want to share with providers in the platform. They also have the ability to make MSLs or medical information specialists available online in the platform. And there's 3 ways of doing it. They could make them, having them available on demand. So if I'm a provider, I jump on the platform, I'm looking through, Acme Pharmaceuticals product, and maybe I have a question, I could hit contact a medical expert, and I can see if there are any MSLs or medical information specialists available online, and in which case I could connect with them directly. So that's one option. The other option is that providers can actually schedule meetings with an MSL or an MI person also. So maybe, a provider just wants to talk to a doctor at a later time in their day. They could schedule that meeting, and the calendars will all sync. So the provider's calendar will also sync with the MSL's calendar, so there won't be any booking of appointments if it's, if the MSL is not available. So it's a very customized way that MSLs can make themselves available in the platform to engage. And then, of course, there's also a chat feature that they can chat with providers and MSLs together. And it could be a way for MSLs to have this ongoing conversations also with providers in there. So it's a pretty dynamic, a pretty robust way of how medical affairs can manage the content and share the content. There's some other pretty cool features in there, like we can do live updates. So medical affairs can drive like live updates, kind of like very similar to like Instagram. You see the Instagram like stories. They can do that, and they can target it to different types of providers to make it more relevant to that particular provider. So there's quite a lot of interesting features that we built in there. And I'm looking forward to sharing it with different companies who are interested.
Great. So it really allows pharma companies to share information in more real-time fashion, and which is relevant now because the volume of publications is doubling every 70 to 75 days. So it's very difficult to organize it for the pharmaceutical companies, as well as for providers to consume all of that information. Right? So they need that information right at their fingertips. So you're kind of making that the transfer information, the exchange, a little smoother. In terms of the compliance and all the regulatory variables, those are the responsibility of the pharmaceutical company. So they upload whatever information that is approved for them to share into your app, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
And they can make things on and off, turn things on and off if they wanted to. So for example, if they didn't want to have maybe MSLs on demand, maybe they just wanted to have them only available for scheduled meetings for whatever compliance purposes, that on-demand feature can be turned off. So it's really it's customizable for the pharma companies based on their compliance tolerance, I guess.
Yeah. Now, what part of the program makes it more applicable to the community? Is it easier to use, or can you elaborate on how you would expand, reach a wider audience?
Yeah, great question, Tim. So one of the things with us is the first thing we want to do is with this platform is create a one-stop shop, right, for a doctor, where they can learn about new medications in one place. Right now, if a doctor wants to find out about any new medication, either they're going to do Google search, like Gibu mentioned, they're going to jump on PubMed, or they're going to go to a bunch of different product websites, which is not conducive to their daily workflow. And so, what our idea was creating a one-stop shop for a provider, and that's what Discreedly will serve as. So that's one of the things that we're targeting for the community provider. And now, as far as them onboarding into the platform, we've actually made it pretty easy for a provider to log into Discreedly, in the sense that it's a very simple sign-up process. If they want to create an account, they can use their a Google SSO. So if they have a Google account, they can use that to sign in. And actually, pretty interestingly, and we're pretty excited about this, is that we actually were able to secure a partnership essentially with Doximity and use their SSO. So if you are a provider who has a Doximity profile, and about 80% of doctors in the US are on Doximity. So they can use our Doximity profile to jump into Discreedly. They don't have to create a new account.
Congratulations.
Really, thank you. Yeah. It makes it really easy, for a provider to jump into that space and provide them with that ready, quick access to content. And to really speak to that, you were talking about like, how is this targeting the community providers, in additional ways. It's really about bringing awareness to medical affairs and bringing awareness to what an MSL is, what medical affairs is, and what we can provide. And I think, like Gibu, maybe you can kind of speak to those conversations we had with some providers about, some of the conversations we had about like, how do they currently find out about new medications or new information? It was absolutely shocking. And at the same time, it was also very encouraging for us that we were on the right track. And I don't know, Gibu, if you'd like to elaborate on
Yeah,
that.
I mean, like I mentioned earlier, about that special situation I was in, and on top of that, like upon our research, when the answers that we were getting about how these people were finding out about around medical affairs, or even how often they were actually aware of what medical affairs does, it was just astonishing. We do have data around that, of how people use medical affairs, how they find it effective afterwards, what kind of actions they take after meeting with medical affairs, and I think I don't know, like I can go on in detail like for hours about how we can use the value of medical affairs from
Yeah,
a
I
healthcare
think
perspective.
for me, one of the stories I was trying to allude to was actually in a conversation we had with a provider in Texas, who was, we were trying to find out for them, like, how do they find out about, a new medicine, and do they even know what a medical affairs division is? And for this provider in Texas, it was an oncologist, a community oncologist, and the way that they find out about new drugs is through a WhatsApp group that they have with their colleagues. So they're literally texting each other and like, hey, did you hear anything new about any new drug or whatever? I'm trying to remember the physician from California. What was that, Jibu?
Yeah, so like he was saying that when he goes to some of these conferences, sometimes what he does is he'll take quick pictures
Yeah.
of the presentation to try to get information. He'll then take screenshots and make his own PowerPoint presentation to try to remember the information that he had learned that day, which we thought was absolutely astonishing because this information is available. He just doesn't know how to reach that information, and that's kind of what we want to have available to them through this app.
And so that's really what Discreedly is doing, is making this awareness of this kind of resource that exists in a one-stop shop for a doctor and a community level provider.
Yeah.
Really going after that needs-based engagement, really, Tim, if that's really what we're focused on.
Yeah. And, our pharma and biotech and the research that we help promote, I think, is dependent on the needs that we learn from the physicians.
Yeah.
And so you're ultimately facilitating that the two-way exchange as well, because medical liaisons are able to log into your program, meet with the physicians, and then afterwards also capture some of those insights that they can bring in, which can inform and even transform some studies. I imagine. How does this program also improve the quality of at the clinical point of care?
That's a great question, Tim. And one of the things that we're exploring right now is by making the information that a provider receives more pertinent to their daily practice. And the way we're looking at doing that is by bringing in EMR data. So that, again, is with Jibu's focus point, right? If we're able to tie in EMR data into the platform and obviously in a compliant manner and in a de-identified manner, pharma companies will be able to know, like, based off of particular provider, what their patient demographic looks like. And then as a result, they'll be able to provide more specific content based on that particular patient profile that that provider has, making sure that in essence, the content that the provider receives will be more relevant to them, and then also streamline, any data updates that may be pertinent to that provider based on their patient demographics, and increase that patient, increase the patient outcomes as a result. Because the whole thing with one of the things that we see with patient outcomes is awareness, right? Like, if we know that, studies have shown that if a physician is aware of a new medication and initiates that new medication, soon, it can increase the outcomes of a patient drastically. Whereas if a physician is maybe unaware of a new medication, or if there's even a 4-week delay in starting a new medication that might be beneficial for, a cancer patient, for example, that can lead to like a 13% increase in mortality. So it's really all about, for us with this platform, is by making this pertinent to the provider, driving awareness to the treatments that are available, driving awareness to the data that's outcoming, that has been that's aware, and creating access to that information in a streamlined manner to improve that provider's outcomes. Because when we talk about treatment profiles, we always talk about patient journeys. Like, patient journey is the biggest conversation you hear. Medical affairs is the patient journey on their product. But we always have to remember that the patient's journey starts with the provider putting them on that path, right? If the provider is not prescribing a particular medication, that patient journey doesn't exist. And so we need to make sure that the provider is putting the patient on the right path in the right patient journey for that patient at the most pertinent and opportune time, so that that journey has the best outcome for them. And that's really what we're kind of taking it back, is bringing it back to the start point on a game board. Like this is where we really need to focus, and that's really what we're hoping to do with Discreetly.
Great. Well, I'm really inspired by your view of how we need to change our conventional norms of communication with physicians. I think a lot of the current generation of healthcare professionals are already raised on social media and on data that Gibu, I think you're also alluding to, that they're using it already. And so we in the pharma and biotech, I think, need to provide it via this omni-channel strategy that you have and you've outlined as well.
Yeah, I think hospital systems were really slow to adapt this technology, but they kind of were forced to. And once they were forced to, now the landscape of healthcare technology has completely evolved, and it's just going to continue moving in that manner as technology does everywhere, right? And I think, pharma needs to adapt to it, and I think that's what Discreetly is here to do.
I think, Gibu, you hit the nail on the head there, in the sense that, pharma, we're such a huge organization, we're such an old organization, but we're also very slow to take transformative actions. And we're very, very slow in that. And if you compare us to any other industry, it takes so long for us to adapt new ways of working and create transformational change. And I think honestly now it's just time for, especially in the medical affairs space, I think it's even more tends to be even more slow as far as like transforming and adapting. And I think now we just have to sort of let those chains go and really just take a dive and just be bold and transform for the patient,
I absolutely agree. Now, just from a real world perspective, the interoperability of your program with the current CRMs that are available or other programs, there's so many, these they're increasing constantly, right? So how easy is it? How is it to adopt, to implement, and then to also work with other apps as well on top of other programs, for example, from a technological kind of perspective?
So one of the nice things about our platform is, first, from a provider perspective, they don't have to download anything. They don't have to download any external clients or anything like that. So all the video and audio is all done in the online platform. So you don't, which is the nice thing about that. The second thing is that we have a dynamic dashboard. So we're capturing all this information, is around engagement, around, content engagement, scientific engagement. Everything's been captured in the dashboard. And right now we're working on building, our next focus is to focus on creating those connectors to different systems, CRM systems, so that way it can become, accessible to that provider. Or to the company, rather, I should say. And so that's something that's going to be on our focus point right now in this coming year, because we understand that, there are some systems that companies use, especially CRM systems, and we want to make sure that it all kind of ties in and just becomes easy for companies to utilize Discreetly. And so that's in the works right now.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you very much for making such strong steps in accelerating communication between healthcare providers and pharma and biotech. I think this is a very smart approach, a very innovative approach, and to engagement with healthcare physicians. Please let us know, what your message would be to those who are interested in pharma, in medical affairs, how they can contact you.
I think, one of the things is, if you're interested in pharma and really in the medical affairs space, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, available there, or you can email us, and maybe Tim, if you can pop our contact information up at the end or something, that'd be great. But we're available on LinkedIn, and
also our website is right up at the top corner. So if you can always submit for any sort of information, both Vinay and I will get that email immediately down at the bottom. info@discreetly.com. We're happy to engage with anyone that wants to talk about medical affairs in the healthcare space.
And as far as like what we wanted to share in our journey is that, since our platform is kind of trying to address two different types of stakeholders, both the medical affairs as well as the healthcare providers, it's really important that you keep both of those lens in that conversation in view, as you're building and as you're developing it. And that means doing a ton of extensive research and conversations, and not being afraid to just ask questions, even silly questions or questions you may feel like might be redundant questions, just to reaffirm and reconfirm your hypothesis. Essentially, I think medical affairs are full of scientists, and one of the biggest things that you need to do is always prove the hypothesis, right? And so I think that's one of the things that we were constantly trying to do, is validate, what we're thinking about is in alignment with what actually providers need. And so that's one of the things that we learned in our journey, is keeping that provider focus in mind. And I think, in medical affairs, it's a great space. It's a really great space for people, especially in, the healthcare world, who are looking to make, impact on patient lives in a different way. And I think the medical affairs is a great opportunity for that, especially those physicians or pharmacists or anybody, in the scientific realm, who are looking to make a change in the patient world, but in a different way of doing it, I guess.
Yes.
So.
Well, you've definitely piqued our interest, I think. And I'm sure you're going to be exhibiting and going to various different conferences as a company, and hopefully at other innovation events. But you are both certainly the first ever medical affairs innovation Olympians, and also Olympic champions as well. So we hope to see you at the 2023 edition to tell us how you're progressing with Discreedly. And usually at Alloutcoach, our slogan here is stretch yourself, lift others. So as competitors, as innovators and healthcare professionals with foresight, with tremendous level of foresight, let us know how you're stretching yourself and lifting others in the rest of the year, or in your next project.
Yeah, I think the one thing, the message that I would share, and maybe Gibu, you have a different perspective or additional perspective, is one of the things that I think that we want to share with people is to be bold. Be bold in the steps that you take, and the only way you're going to find your answer, even if the answer is no, is by asking the question and by really taking that step. I can just tell you, it's been a really long journey. It's been a lot of sleepless nights, a ton of sleepless nights.
A lot of time
experience, exactly. And I think the experience has just been a really incredible experience, because one thing it showed me and Gibu is that by being bold, you find out that you're really capable of more than what you think you know. If you told me, 10 years ago or even 15 years ago that, we'd be working on a startup, having conversations with, huge organizations, CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and doing things like that, I would have just been like, you're joking. You're there's no way. And I think the main thing is for us is that you just have to take that leap. Just take that leap of faith, be bold, and trust in the higher power, and go for it. And I think that's really what it has been for us.
Yeah, and just to add to that is just like, you have to be ready to adapt. Always adapt. Know what the user wants, and always adapt. Always be ready to pivot whatever it is that you're building. It's super important to know what the user actually needs and make the technology for that user in mind.
Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing those lessons as well, through your journey of physicians to startup entrepreneurs and Olympic champions as well in innovation and medical affairs. So thank you very much. Very nice to see you both again. Hope to hear more from you this year. Good luck with all your endeavors.
Thanks.
You've heard from Drs. Vinay Tharayil and Gibu George. Connect with them, my friends at Alloutcoach. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Tim. Have a great one.
Bye.
Thank you.